Hello, and thank you for your interest in presenting at ACTFL 2024 in Philadelphia. My name is Kathy Shelton, and I'm the ACTFL Convention Committee Chair. And I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of the process for you, the timeline, the rubrics for scoring, etc. You may want to go to the ACTFL convention page and download the submission guidelines. That's basically the information that I'm going to be using throughout this presentation. We did update the guidelines for 2024. So if you'd like to download those and follow along as I go through the presentation, you can do that, or you can do it later. I'll have everything on the screen to take a look at. So the first thing is I did want to show who are the convention committee members. So you can see that there are 10 of us across a variety of languages, higher ed and K-12, different regions, as well as the 5 conference regions. And then we also have the 3 members of ACTFL, Julia Richardson, Courtney Wu, and Casey Bloyer, who help us with this. But the 10 committee members, we are all volunteers who enjoy organizing the convention and getting everything ready. So I just wanted you to see everyone who was on the convention committee for from 2023. If you'd like to be a member of the convention committee or you'd like to get involved with ACTFL, feel free to go to the ACTFL website and just go to their volunteer portal. There's lots of opportunities. You can put in for a general volunteer, or you can choose a committee that you'd like to volunteer for. So if you've never worked with ACTFL and you want to get a little bit more involved or help on the convention committee, go ahead and we would love to have you work with us. So as I mentioned, the call for proposals is open. ACTFL 2024 is in Philadelphia from November 22nd through the 24th. You can find the submission portal on the call for proposals page of the ACTFL website. Notice that the submission deadline is January 26th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, and it is a very hard deadline. So if you go in at midnight on January 27th, you're not going to be able to submit a proposal. So note that it's 11:59 Eastern time is the deadline for the proposal. So if you are interested in presenting, hopefully you can meet that deadline. So just a quick recap of the goal of the ACTFL Convention and Expo is, you can see here, is basically it's a professional development experience. We try to make it as comprehensive as possible. We want it to have an impact on language educators and teachers, and we want to help all of our students succeed. And it is an international convention. We have attendees, usually between 6,000 to 7,000 attendees from all over the world who come and attend the convention and the expo in the exhibit hall. So we would love to have you join us in 2024 in Philly, and we'd love to have you put in a submission to try to present also. So here's some general information just about the convention. So if you would like to submit a proposal, you can submit one proposal as a lead presenter, and you could be a co-presenter on an additional proposal. Or you can be a co-presenter on 2 proposals if you're not a lead presenter. So you can submit twice, once as a lead, once as a co, or twice as 2 co-presenters. You do have to write your proposal in English, but you can actually do this session in another language. But all of the submissions do have to be written in English. So just to reiterate, if you are going to be the lead presenter, you can submit one time, and then you can be listed as a co-presenter on another one, or you can be listed as a co-presenter twice. Do note that if you're the lead presenter, you're going to fill in all the information both for yourself and for any of your co-presenters. When you submit your proposal, so like I said, you have until in January, when you submit the proposal, you don't have to be a member of ACTFL. But if your proposal does get accepted and you're selected to present, you do have to either be a current member of ACTFL through the end of November 30th of 2024, or you have to be a member of one of our partner organizations, which are the American Association of Teachers of German, Italian, Japanese, and then the 2 Chinese language organizations, CLAS and CLTA. Or you could be a member of, since we're in Philly, you could be a member of the Pennsylvania Language Association also. So again, you don't have to be a member to submit, but if you are accepted and you intend to present, you do have to be either a member of ACTFL, a partner organization, or the Pennsylvania Language Association through November 30th of next year. So let's talk about the acceptance rates, because it's a lot of times people submit and they're like, I don't understand why I didn't get accepted. So let me just walk you through a little bit about what happens as we're choosing sessions. So first off, the likelihood of getting accepted depends on several different factors. So number one is just obviously the quality of your proposal based on the score and the ranking and the rubrics, which we'll go through the details of that later. Another thing to keep in mind is the number of proposals that are submitted for each presentation type and each keyword, which we will talk about here in the next pages. But sessions are the number one type of presentation that everybody puts in for. So your chances of getting selected for submission are less than, for example, if you put in for a paper or a roundtable. The same as the keywords. The keywords, you'll find them all listed on the actual submission page. And some keywords are very popular, for example, culture, assessment, interpersonal strategies. Those are very popular keywords. And so the majority of the submissions are under some of those more common keywords. So if you want to increase your chances of getting accepted, look at some of the keywords that maybe aren't quite so typical and see if there's a way that if you have an idea that you want to present on, can you tailor your presentation to address that need in the field? And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on also. And then the other factor is just how much meeting space we have for the convention. So how many meeting rooms we have, how much space they have, et cetera. So in Philly, it will just depend on how many meeting rooms are available. And then that determines how many session presentations that we can choose. So a number of different factors go into whether your proposal will be accepted or not. So let's take a look at the acceptance rates that we just had in Chicago. So if you notice, there's 5 different types of presentations. There are posters, research papers, roundtables, practice-oriented papers, and sessions. So if you notice, 71% of posters of people who submitted to do a poster were accepted. 68% of research papers were accepted. 63% of roundtables, 60% of practice-oriented papers, and only 51% of sessions were accepted. So if you notice, if you put in for a session, your chance of getting accepted is only about, you have like a 50% basically chance of getting accepted. And then the overall acceptance rate for all of the submissions, I think we had somewhere around 1,700 submissions, was 62%. So just sort of keep this in mind also as we're going through the video, that sessions are the most popular one that everybody puts in for, but it also means that your chance of getting accepted is less likely if all you put in for is a session. So notice at the bottom here, the important detail I put, when you are putting in your proposal, you can, put in for a session, but you will have a box where you can request that your session be considered for another format if it's not selected as a session. So you may put in that your first choice is a session, but you could check the box that if I'm not accepted for a session, I'd like to be considered for a roundtable, for example. So bear that in mind. I highly recommend that when you put in for your session, that you put in an alternate in case that you're not chosen for the session. It doesn't lessen your chance of your session getting accepted, but it does give you a second opportunity if your session isn't accepted. So as I mentioned, there's 5 types of proposals. There's the session, the practice-oriented paper, research-oriented paper, electronic poster, and the roundtable. And so when you go into the proposal portal on the ACTFL website, you'll see these 5 colored icons. So let's go through what those 5 different types of proposals look like. So a session, very straightforward. It's the in-person, the typical in the large room, 45-minute presentation. You can either be a single presenter or you can be a lead presenter with up to 3 co-presenters. So that's probably the most, like I said, the most popular, the most common one that most people typically envision when they think of a conference. The next option is a practice-oriented paper. The way the practice-oriented paper works is you will give a 15-minute presentation on a paper, and it will actually be a 45-minute session, but there's 3 groups of people presenting. So what the committee does is we choose papers that have relevant topics, and we group them into groups of 3, and then each group has 15 minutes to present. And these types of papers usually focus on a specific classroom application, types of activities, types of techniques. So this is nice if you're thinking, well, I'm not really sure I want to do a full 45-minute presentation. This may be a nice way to get your feet wet, to just do a 15-minute presentation in a group of two other people or two other presenters doing a similar topic. Research-oriented paper, very similar format. It's the same type of thing. So you will give a 15-minute presentation on some sort of research that you've done. It'll be a 45-minute session where you will be grouped with two other teams. So you'll have 15 minutes to talk. And you'll present your research findings and implications in an appealing format. So it's not to just go and read your paper, but it's actually to share your research in an engaging format. And usually presenters tend to do about 10 minutes of presentation and then leave about 5 minutes for questions from the group. So again, if you're not sure that you're ready to do a 45-minute session, a research-oriented paper is a nice first time option. Electronic poster is a little bit different. So the way the electronic poster works is that you're going to be in the exhibit hall and you'll have 60 minutes. And you choose a project or research presentation that you're going to do. So you'll have to bring a laptop and you'll have a high top table. And what you'll do is you'll have your presentation displayed on your laptop and you'll be talking about it, and attendees can view, they can interact with you, they can walk about. There'll be a lot of different posters going on at the same time, sort of scattered around the exhibit hall. So you'll basically, oops, sorry about that. You will just talk about your presentation, answer questions. Again, you have 60 minutes, which is kind of nice. So it's a little bit longer than the 45 minutes. And again, it's another way that if you're not sure you want to do a full session, it's another nice way to sort of do an introductory way to sort of get a feel for what it's like to present at ACTFL. And then your last option is a round table, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. So it's a 45-minute presentation, but this time you literally are seated around a round table, like in the picture, and there will be 10 people total at the table. And you can't have more than 2 presenters top. So 2 presenters, 8 people, or 1 presenter with 9 people. And you sit around, and this is a way to do a more in-depth discussion on a particular topic. So maybe you have, something about some classroom management strategies. There's some, exchange programs you've done, whatever the topic might be. Sometimes you might have a topic that you're like, this would be better to sort of network and get a little bit more in-depth discussion. These are nice to attend, and they are nice also to present at as an option. A lot of people who put in for a session will choose a round table as an alternative format if their session doesn't get accepted. So just something to think about. All right, let's talk about the review process. So what actually happens once you've submitted your session? So let's talk about that. So the first thing is the timeline. So as I mentioned earlier, January 26th at 11:59 Eastern time, you have to submit your proposal via the online portal. And then we will notify you by the decision of whether or not you have been selected and in which format by the end of April 2024. So it does take us, by the time everyone submits, it takes about 3 months to do the reviewing and for the committee to do the final selection. Do keep in mind that the only way to submit is through the online portal. So if you email it to a board member or email it to me or email it to the ACTFL staff, it won't get accepted. So you want to make sure that if you're submitting that you do it through the online portal. All right, let's talk about some general guidelines. So one thing to keep in mind is don't put any personally identifiable information in your proposal, because the first round of reviews is done as a masked review where it's anonymous. And so the reviewers do not know who is submitting. So you want to make sure you don't put your name or your organization that you're with, or like you're a former teacher of the year or anything like that. If you put that, then your proposal will get reviewed, but the commenters will put a comment that they put in PII and we know who this person is, and then you're going to end up getting declined in the final round. So just be very careful that you don't put anything in the proposal that will let anyone know who you are or what organization that you're with. The other thing, this is very important, when you go to the online submission portal, you need to make sure that your school or organization affiliation is updated. So when you first get in there, there's an edit button that you can click on. Or at the end of it, you can also use the preview button to check for accuracy. The thing to be careful of is that don't just check your ACTFL profile, because even if you update your ACTFL profile information, that doesn't always transfer over to the submission portal because they are two different databases. So you want to be careful that when you look in there for yourself and for your co-presenters, that you want to make sure everything is accurate, because we oftentimes, once the program is published, we get a lot of emails from people who are like, wait, you have the wrong school, or you have the wrong organization, or I've switched, or you have my old school, or whatever. So you want to make sure that you have the accurate information within there. So you can, like I said, you can either hit the edit button when you first submit your proposal, but at the end, there's also a preview button that you have to click, and you have to say that everything is accurate. So just be very careful that you have accurate information for yourself and also for your co-presenters. So let's talk about the reviewers. So as I mentioned, all the reviewers are volunteers. So it's volunteers. It's not just the committee. We have dozens and dozens of educators from around the country who volunteer to help review. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 2 rounds. So the first round of the review process is a masked review. And you will have at least 5 different reviewers who will look over your presentation and score it, or your submission proposal, and score it based on the rubric. And again, they do not know your name or affiliation, so you want to make sure you don't put any identifying information in there. Then what happens is, after all of the volunteers have reviewed all of the sessions, and there's at least 5 reviewers, sometimes it might be more, but it's a minimum of 5, then the system actually averages all the different independent scores, and they provide a spreadsheet to the convention committee that gives us the ranking of all the proposals, as well as any comments and your scores and all the information that you submitted. So that's the first round. And as I mentioned, all the reviewers are volunteers. There are no ACTFL staff who are doing the reviewers. It's all teachers and our colleagues around the country who are doing the reviews. Let's talk about SIG. So a SIG, which is, if you're not familiar with that term in ACTFL, is a special interest group. And we have like 10 or 15, I forget how many exactly, about 15 different SIGs that are based around, for example, communicative teaching, or intercultural competence, or research, or heritage learners. So if you are a member of a SIG, when you submit your proposal, you'll have a checkbox that you can choose that says you would like your proposal to be reviewed and scored by the ACTFL SIG, and you have to be a member of that SIG. So you may want to have your proposal reviewed or scored by the SIG. And then what happens is the SIG will review all of the sessions where people submitted to them specifically, and they will choose 2 sessions that they say, these are 2 for sure that we want to go in the final program. And so those 2 will be, for the convention committee, those 2 are selected. And so we don't worry about them. If you're not selected by the SIG, it doesn't mean you're out of contention for being selected. What the SIGs do then is the other sessions that they didn't accept, but they've already scored and reviewed, they just put those back into the general pool. So the convention committee, during the final review, during the final selection process, we will still have your score and your ranking within there. So again, some people like to have the SIGs actually review their proposals. Others prefer to just be in the general pool. But if you put in for the SIG, you do have to be a member of that SIG. All right, so I talked about that was the first round. So then there's the final selection process. And this is where the convention committee, like I mentioned, the 10 volunteers, this is where we get a spreadsheet of all the scored and reviewed proposals. We have all the comments, we have the rankings, we have everything. And from here, we make the final selection. And as I mentioned before, first off, we have a number that we're given by the ACTFL staff that says, okay, this is how many rooms and how many sessions we're going to be able to have at the convention. So, you need to choose 300 sessions out of all the submissions. So we have a number that we're given by ACTFL. So we know exactly how many we're allowed to choose. And then we choose, like some backups in case people can't present it, they're selected. The other thing that we do is we look at a lot of different components. So we don't only look at, say, okay, we're going to choose 300 sessions. We only choose the top 300. What we do is we look at the scores, obviously, and the rankings, but we also want to make sure at the convention that we have a good balance of languages, of audience level, whether it's pre-K, K-12, post-secondary, of focus areas and keywords, as I mentioned before, and a representation of experts in the field. So this is similar to what I was saying about the keywords before, that if, say we chose 300 sessions and 250 of those had to do with intercultural competence, obviously that would not be a good balance. Or, 250 of them were French, and then we didn't have any other languages hardly represented. So as the convention committee, we look at the rankings, but we also make sure, okay, do we have a balance of languages, different audience levels, different keyword focuses, and any experts in the field that we know are good speakers within a certain topic. So there's a lot that goes into the choosing from the convention committee. A couple things that we want to make sure that are clarified is that free resources only are allowed to be provided. So what that means is if you are selected to present in any format, that obviously presentations are educational and it has to remain non-commercial. So you can't provide any resources that your participants would have to purchase. Free resources, yes, we love it, but you can't provide anything that someone would have to purchase, because we really want to just keep the sessions educational. So the other thing is, if you're presenting, you're not permitted to endorse or promote any commercial product that you have an affiliation or self-interest. So for example, we know a lot of educators, a lot of teachers help write chapters in textbooks, or they have a Teachers Pay Teachers store, or you volunteer with different exhibitors, etc. If you have any of the, if you're a teacher and you have any of those interests in a commercial product or self-interest, you cannot endorse those or advocate for those during your session. So the session has to remain 100% non-commercial. If you do have free resources, feel free to share them, but they have to be housed in an independent space from commercial products. So say you own a Teachers Pay Teachers store or some online marketplace, and you have free resources and resources that have to be bought. You cannot provide your Teachers Pay Teachers store and say, here's some free stuff. It would have to be housed separately, maybe in a Google Drive or anything, just to keep everything educational and non-commercial. I think we all know the feeling of, we go into a session and we think it's going to be giving us information, then it turns into a sales pitch, and none of us are, that's unfortunate when that happens. So the goal is, feel free to share anything you want that's free, and just keep anything that's commercial or that would have to be purchased, just cannot be part of your presentation. So who can submit through the online portal, through that link that I gave you? So if you are an educator, teacher, professor, educator, and you're affiliated with a nonprofit, you can submit through that online portal and share anything free. So if you're with a state organization, a state agency, a language resource center, anything that is a nonprofit, you are welcome to submit through the online portal, and any free resources you have, feel free to share as much as you want. If you are an educator who is an independent contractor or a freelance consultant, or you do authoring on the side, or you do contracting on the side, or you volunteer, or you have a side gig with either an exhibitor at ACTFL or with a for-profit company, you can still submit through the online portal. But as we mentioned before, you can only share free resources, and they have to be housed independently. So again, this is if it's a sort of a side gig, or you're just an independent consultant. It's not like a full-blown company where you're out selling products or you're out promoting yourself and trying to get a lot of business. This is if you're doing something as a side gig. As an independent or freelance consultant or author, you are permitted to submit through the online portal. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're a current classroom teacher and you also sell via an online marketplace like TPT, et cetera, you can present, but you cannot promote your product. So you can't put your TPT store up there. You can't put, here's links to all my products, et cetera. You can only share free resources that are housed independently. Who cannot submit online through the proposal? So this is the difference. So if you are you're an exhibitor at ACTFL, or you're a full or a part-time employee of ACTFL, you are only permitted to do an exhibitor workshop in the exhibitor workshop space. And those are very popular. They are very well attended. We have different rooms that are set up it's in the exhibit hall, but they're separate. They have separate walls, a door that closes. You have microphone, you have speakers, you have a screen, a projector, everything. So it's still a typical presentation, but you have to do it in the exhibit hall through the exhibitor workshop. So just if you are a full or a part-time employee, so not an independent contractor, but you're actually an employee of the company, you have to actually go through contract with them through the exhibitor workshop. If you are a for-profit commercial business and or you're a full-time or part-time employee and you want to present, you still have to contract to be an exhibitor and do an exhibitor workshop. So you have a company, you're selling a bunch of different products, you can't do a regular session. You have to contract for exhibit hall space and do your session with it as an exhibitor workshop instead. The goal of this is that we really want to have as many educators, current educators present as possible. A lot of educators in the K-12 and post-secondary, a lot of times the only way they can get their attendance and their travel paid for is if they're presenting. So we truly want to allow teachers who need the session presentation in order to have their travel accommodated for. So any commercial entities or exhibitors do have to go through the exhibitor workshop. If you have questions about that, you can email us about it. All right, so let's talk about the scoring rubric. So what do we actually look at when the reviewers are scoring you? So if you have the submission guidelines pulled up from the ACTFL site, we're on page 8. If you want to pause this video, you can go back to the ACTFL proposal site and pull up the guidelines and go to page 8. So I'm just going to go through the rubric. So the rubric itself, when you're doing a session, you have an opportunity for 20 points. And there are 5 different sections that you can get points, a score of up to 4 on. So you're going to get points based on your proposal, title, and description, based on the relevance of your proposal, based on your content and purpose, based on the outcomes and the strategies for engagement. So the highest score you can get is 20. And then the lowest score, or you can get up to 4 points on each one. So the lowest score you could get would be a 5 because your lowest score is a 1. So let's go through those 5 bullets here together. So the first thing with the proposal, the title, and the description, what the reviewers are looking at is it well written and does it align with the content and purpose of the proposal? So if I'm looking in the program and I look at the title and description and the proposal overall, is it well written? Is it clear? Is it easy to be understood? Does it align with what your purpose is? The second step is the second part of the review process is the relevance of the proposal. So is it relevant to the world readiness standards? And is it relevant to proficiency-oriented instruction? The third piece is the content and purpose. So is it innovative or is it reflecting current trends or research? Does it advance teaching and learning? So it may be might be a common topic. For example, maybe you're doing something on backward design or some sort of intercultural assessment. Is it sort of taking something that's based on research and is it adding anything new to it or is it advancing teaching and learning with it? So it doesn't always have to be the most cutting edge topic, but you do want to have something that's going to be advancing teaching and learning. The fourth piece is the outcomes. The outcomes is basically, are they clear, specific, and measurable? And do they align with the content? So in there, you have a section where it says, what are the outcomes? What will the participants get out of this session? And so the reviewers are looking at, is it very obvious when I go to this session, these are the 3 things I'm going to get out of this session? And then the last one is the strategies for engagement. And this is just for the sessions on the rubric, are they clear and specific? And will the participants be involved? So participants don't want to go in and just listen to someone lecture them for 45 minutes. Is there some sort of participation? And how are you going to do that? So those are the 5 overall step-by-step. So let's look at them on the rubric. So on the rubric, the first thing, as we mentioned, the 4 score is what you're really trying to go for, the exceeds expectation. As I mentioned, it's very competitive. As I mentioned, we only get like half of the session proposals get accepted. It's very, very competitive. So you want to make sure you're really aiming for that 4, the exceeds expectations on the rubrics. So with your proposal title and description, is it well written? Does it align clearly with the content and purpose of the proposal? It's a 4. And then as you go down the 3, the 2, and the 1 score on the rubric, you can see it goes to clearly written, to adequately written, to not adequately written. So you definitely want to aim for that 4 on the rubric. The next, or sorry, a couple things to think about that with is you want to have it engaging, inviting, outcome-based. You want to pique your participants' attention, and you want to make sure it reflects the content and purpose. So you might have your first sentence should be, could be a hook or a question or something that as soon as I read that first sentence, I'm like, yes, this is something I want to go see. And then sentence number 2, you could give some concrete examples of what you're going to do, the ideas that you're going to share. And then sentence 3, share some group engagement to attract participants. How will they be involved? What will I do? There is a character and space limit, so you want to make sure you stick to those limits also when you're submitting. So things that you want to avoid. You don't want to use the first person. You don't want to use I or we or my, et cetera. You want to keep everything in the third person. You want to avoid any personal information, as we mentioned, and don't identify your institution either. And you want to avoid a title that's kind of vague, like teaching language through songs doesn't really tell me anything. Technology for language learning, it doesn't tell me anything. When I look at this title, it's like, okay, they're going to talk about songs, but I have no idea what. So the participants should be able to look at your title and description and have a pretty accurate idea of what's going to happen when they go to your session. So here's a good example. I'll give you 30 seconds to read through this. So it's obvious what's going to happen. We're going to look at authentic assessments. We're going to look at examples of them about how they connect to the standards and social justice. And we're also going to create similar assessments. So that's an example of one that was accepted. Here's another one. I'll give you 30 seconds to read through it. So you can see this one is a roundtable proposal, and it's going to talk about novice level speaking, innovative activities, comprehensible questions, supporting output, reducing affective filter. We're going to talk about how to move across the proficiency levels, et cetera. So these are 2 very good examples of a very solid proposal. Here's one that is not quite as comprehensive as it needs to be. So go ahead and read through this one. So you can see as you read that, you're sort of like, well, I don't really know what you're actually going to be talking about. Here's another one that's not quite as comprehensive as it could be. So again, when I read it, I'm not quite sure what exactly you're going to be talking about. And the thing is, the sessions could be amazing, like this one and the one before. It could be an amazing session when you go in there, but if it's not shown in the actual submission, it's going to give you a much more difficult chance of actually getting in there to do this great session. So just really follow the rubric for the title and description. All right, let's talk about the relevance of the proposal. So the same thing, you really want to aim for the 4. So it's fully relevant to the standards and it supports proficiency-oriented instruction. You really want to go with that. And then you can just see as you go down to a 3, a 2, and a 1, how it lessens as it goes down the rubric. So you want to make sure that you review the World Readiness Standards, and you want to talk about how it supports proficiency-oriented instruction. And it could be at the macro level. It doesn't necessarily have to be, really micro, this is exactly what it's doing, but even at a macro level, how does it support the standards, whether it's the, the 5 C's, which ones are which one or which ones is your proposal supporting? And again, you want to talk about innovative approaches, but it could be something that's traditional or well-known. It doesn't always have to be the most, cutting edge thing out there, but you do want to take something and make sure that it's taking something traditional, but it's really, like we said, it's really improving teaching and learning for educators and students. All right, third one is the content and purpose. So again, you want to look at a content and purpose that are either innovative, they reflect education trends, or they reflect research-informed practices, and they describe specific knowledge and skills. So again, it might be something cutting edge. It could be something that's very traditional. It's a trend. It's very research-informed, but it's important and it has specific knowledge and skills. So that's what you're aiming for in the rubric. And then you can read the other 3 as they go down. So let's talk about some things with content and purpose. So you do want to connect with or research current issues and themes in language acquisition and the standard. So what's trending on, hashtag Lang Chat? What's on social media? What's on Facebook? What's on Instagram? What are the issues that teachers are facing now? So research it, connect with it, research it, find out what are the needs of teachers, and tailor your proposal to that. So as I mentioned, you can look in social media. You can, if you get the language educator, there's different ACTFL forums or the SIGs. Look at past conference programs. If you have the mobile app from Chicago, that's still available. And the other thing to think about is, since you do only have 45 minutes if you're doing a session, probably don't focus on more than 3 aspects of your topic. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough time to get everything covered. So you also want to give concrete examples on why this proposal merits investigation and discussion. You want to connect to other disciplines or levels or cultures if you can. Definitely you want to try to demonstrate how it's inclusive and diverse. You want to focus on learners and educators. Okay, so just different things to think about when you're putting your content and purpose. Things you want to avoid: don't just detail multiple articles or citations. You want to avoid debates or arguments, because we're trying to, promote collaboration and forward thinking and advancing teaching and learning. So we don't want to get into debates or arguments. And we also want to avoid criticizing any specific type of practice or methodology. It's really about, this is what I have, and this is the benefits of it, and how it's going to help our learners and our educators. And also just avoid any personal narratives in there. So you just want to keep it really specific, detailed. All right, the next part of the rubric is the outcomes. So again, you want to aim for that 4. So all of the outcomes are clear, specific, measurable. They align with the content of the proposal. So when the reviewer is looking at your proposal, can they say, okay, this is what the person says the content and the purpose is. Do the outcomes actually align with what they say? So for the outcomes, again, just keep it explicit, effective, make it, why is this worthwhile for the participants? What are they going to get out of it? Again, and as I mentioned before, keep in mind your time limit. So for example, if you're 45 minutes, you can't do a presentation, do multiple activities, create accounts, ask questions. Just be mindful of that 45 minutes, because we all know from presenting that 45 minutes goes a lot faster than we think it will. And you usually want to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions. All right, and then strategies for engagement. Okay, so again, this is just for the session proposals, not for the other ones. So you want to keep in mind that the engagement strategy is clear, specific, they support the outcomes, high participant involvement. So aim for that number 4 column. So things you want to think about: again, be specific of what they're going to do. Are they using technology tools? Are you going to be doing group activities? Are there handouts or resources? Are you going to have time for questions? You might want to give rationale or relevance to the modes of engagement. So just lots of things to think about. This is how I'm going to engage participants, and this is why. And again, all of these, you're going to have a character and space limit. So you do have to keep everything within those boundaries. All right, so what you want to avoid, again, avoid vague or circular statements. Like, for example, there will be active participation. Well, it doesn't really tell the reviewer anything. Okay, or I'll use a presentation tool, etc. And you don't want to just recap the content and purpose, because that then is not going to help you scoring on the rubric. You just want to be specific. Okay, this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to use, this tool. We're going to use this technology tool, and this is what they're going to do with that, etc. So just be really specific. Some final tips. As I mentioned a couple different times, there are character and space limits. So if you copy and paste, like if you write your stuff, for example, in a Word document first or a Google Doc, and then you copy and paste in there, just double check your character limits, etc. And also double check if you used any foreign characters like accent marks or letters that are not typical on the keyboard. Make sure that if you copy and paste, when you transfer it over, make sure it transferred it the way that you wanted it to, because you might have to go in and fix it. You may want to have a colleague or a mentor take the rubric and take your proposal and have them score it and say, where am I falling on the rubric? What do you think? If English is not your dominant language, feel free to get input on natural language use and idiomatic expressions from others. And again, remember that the deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on January 26th. And if you're not accepted, because like I mentioned earlier, it's hard to get accepted. We only can take about 50% of the sessions. Just, revise it, resubmit for next year. Do, as I mentioned earlier, do put in that you're willing to do an alternate format. The roundtable especially is a nice format if you don't get to do a session. So that sums up the submission guidelines, the timeline and the rubrics, et cetera. So hopefully this has incentivized you to do a proposal for Philly. So if you are interested, you can go to actfl.org, call for proposals, and we hope to see you in Philly. And we hope that this is encouraging for you to submit a proposal. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.